Welcome back to Orange Hat Reviews, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful day. So, episode 47 of the Mystery Reviews. Gotta say, I'm truly enjoying making these for you all. It helps me in many ways, but it also helps to inform people, inspire them to watch the movies that I review, and it's something that I really do enjoy. So, I should actually pull up something because I just realized, whoops, I forgot to pull them up. The talking points, which always comes with these things. So the hints that I gave for this one were Rose and Sangreal with a bonus of Job 38:11. Now, Dan Blackroyd is in the chat. He has most likely indeed guessed it. Demons, angels, monks. So, yes, he is most likely talking about what I'm going to be discussing. In the early 2000s, novels were written that sparked off a lot of controversy in both real life and in fiction. A lot of questions were asked. What if certain people were just people, Of course, I am talking about the Davinci Code. Now, Davinci Code is actually, or by Dan Brown, the novel, is actually the second installment of the Langdon series, where Angels and Demons is actually the first. But in the movies, Davinci Code was first. I will never understand the reasoning behind that, but that is the case. And yes, Dan Blackroyd did indeed guess Da Vinci. So, yeah. So, this movie and its sequel movie, plus the predecessor novel, Angels and Demons, is actually very controversial and very hated by the Vatican Church because they make reference to a lot of biblical events as well, and a lot of historical events that the church see as different or see as the way they want it to be seen. Now, the reason why I like this movie so much is because it resonates with me. I've always been a person to ask questions, not just take something at face value. And that indeed does go for the Catholic faith as well. I am baptized Catholic. I do pray every now and then. I'm not a perfect Catholic by any means. However, I also do ask questions that are contrary to the Bible or to the Catholic Bible and to its belief structure. What if Jesus was just an ordinary person? However, he may have been capable of miracles. What if he did have a kid? What if that line indeed exists today? It is not outside the possibility or the realm of possibility, folks. It really isn't. Jesus was a person back 2,000 years ago. So, without further ado, I do want to give you guys or share with you guys the trailer for Davinci Code before we get going. Also, I will be doing the extended edition of Davinci Code, which is like 25 extra minutes to this movie. So, adding to the stream now is the trailer for Davinci Code. Before I play this trailer, I do want to acknowledge to Sony, I do not own any of this content. Whatever I am doing is under fair use. I am only playing the trailer for going through the trailer and as well as reviewing the movie. I do not own it. It is owned by Sony. And it is owned by those who helped make the movie. So with that out of the way, Yes, it really does. The extended edition does fill it, and it adds a lot more context. But also, I will tell a little bit more of it later on. So here is the trailer, folks. Well, actually, hold on a minute. I'm going to put in my headphones so I can, or so there's not a any echo. So sorry about that. And we'll start it over. Can you all still hear me? Okay. Alrighty. So let's get back to it, and let's,
We are in the middle of a war to protect a secret so powerful that if revealed, it would devastate the very foundations of mankind.
Professor Langdon, the chief of police would like your assistance.
I'm not sure how much help I'm going to be here. Dear God. He did this himself in his own blood?
Is it possible?
This is a message your grandfather left you.
He left us.
Might be some kind of anagram.
Can you break it?
Demons, omens, codes, monks. Davinci.
Professor Langdon, you are in grave danger.
From director Ron Howard.
Sir Lee Teabing.
Robert, what can an old cripple do for you?
I'm into something here that I cannot understand.
You asked what will be worth killing for. Open your eyes. Witness the greatest cover-up in human history.
You're saying all this is real?
Real enough to kill for.
Tom Hanks, Audrey Tautou, Ian McKellen, with Paul Bettany and Jean Reno.
You must explode the truth onto the world. Mankind can finally be set free.
The Davinci Code.
So yes, this movie, or this was back when trailers were actually very well done. I truly do like trailers back or in 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. They do not, or they give you enough misdirection so you don't know the story. Where if you look at these trailers nowadays, they're basically telling you everything. So, yes, Davinci Code was done in 2006. It was directed by Ron Howard. It stars Tom Hanks, Audrey Tautou, Sir Ian McKellen, Alfred Molina, Paul Bettany, Jean Reno, and Jurgen Prochnow. The extended edition is 25 minutes longer, adding more context to the film. And as I said, the Vatican and the Catholic Church really do not like this film. It has a great mix of elements, mystery, history, and a great chase. Indeed, it really does. That's another thing that I do like about this is a mystery that you really have to think, but also it's really right in front of you at this whole time. So we begin with a beautiful score by Hans Zimmer. Hans Zimmer did a great job with the score. A lot of people give Hans Zimmer a lot of guff, but when it comes to his music in this movie, that's high quality. And Ron Howard ain't no slouch either. So an older man we see is running through, or from a hooded figure in the Louvre, and no matter how many times I tried spelling the Louvre in Google Documents, it tried correcting it to Louvre, which is furniture of some sort. But yeah, the Louvre is spelled Louvre. So he triggers a lockdown alarm, cutting the figure off from getting to him. Paul Bettany is the hooded figure. He plays an albino gunman, or an albino named Silas. And after the old man tells him something that is not fully intelligible, but you do hear the word Saint Sulpice, he shoots him. And we also are intercut with Tom Hanks' character, Robert Langdon, giving or about to give a presentation, intercut with the old man moving through that area of the Louvre to write down messages that need to be written down and then dying. Langdon is giving a presentation on symbols. This is actually a scene that I truly do like. It is a scene that he basically, I have done this with other people. I have given or done the whole misdirection with other people to get them to actually open their minds and actually think about certain things. He shows them a picture of what looks like the Ku Klux Klan, and people indeed fall for it. And then he zooms out. Well, they would disagree with you in Spain. These are robes that some clergy actually use for prayer and whatnot. He then picks a symbol that is, or that looks like a pitchfork, or the devil's pitchfork, or Satan and whatnot. And he's like, poor Poseidon. This was his trident. And he then does one last one, which is Madonna, or everybody thinks is Madonna and Child. It turns out to be the goddess Isis nursing her son Horus many thousands of years before the birth of Christ. And then he shows several others, but he gives his presentation. Then there is a signing, which is a bit more extended, and it shows Colette, Inspector Colette from like the French FBI or DGAC, and they're asking him to take a look at a photo and a body, and he then talks about the victim, Jacques Saunier, and he's like, why would they do? Or most of it is all shot in location in the Louvre. Exactly. And one of the things I absolutely like is like, he's like, oh, you misunderstand, Professor. He was shot, yes, but what you see in this photograph, Saunier did to himself. So right then, we are, or one of the things about the extended edition, I should say, I'm sorry, I almost jumped forward a little bit, is that if you pay attention to Colette, the inspector, when he picks up Langdon's jacket, you can see him slip something into the pocket, which later on is revealed. And after he tells him that Saunier did the marking or marked himself up himself, we are then cut to Silas talking in Latin to someone on the phone, talking about the Seneschal and Grandmaster. Now, you do not know what these mean yet, and that something is hidden in Saint Sulpice, which is a church in Paris. He then strips down, revealing a cilice, which is a barbed chain that goes around his upper thigh. And he changes it over to his other leg. This scene really makes me uncomfortable. I mean, masochism is something that I do not ascribe to. But Paul Bettany sells this scene very well. The way that he torques it enough to get it tight against the leg, the cilice. How those barbs are cutting into his leg. And you see the blood start to drip down. And I'm like, yikes, what is this? For a first-time viewer, you'd think that this guy is absolutely nuts. He then takes a barbed whip, standing before a cross and says that I chastise my body in the name of Christ. And he says this in Latin. And he then starts whipping himself, or throwing the whip behind himself to whip his lower back, over his shoulder to whip his higher back. You see the cuts into his skin. You see the whip doing its job. And you see Paul Bettany whipping up on his tiptoes as he whips himself, selling that he is indeed doing this to himself. It is one of the most disturbing scenes I have ever seen in film. It's something that when I first saw this movie back in the early 2000s or mid to early 2000s, it's like, yikes, man, this guy is seriously twisted. And thankfully, we are cut away to him we're cut away to the arrival at the Louvre, and Captain Fash is introduced in this scene, played by the brilliant French actor Jean Reno. Now, Jean Reno has played in great movies. He's also played in some bad movies as well. He played in the 1998 Zilla movie. He also played in The Professional, which was a great movie with Natalie Portman as a kid. And he's played in several other movies that I haven't seen, but I have heard are actually pretty decent and pretty good. So definitely shout out to Jean Reno for his performance in this film as Captain Bezu Fash. He was a very fascist cop too. So I love his introduction. He's like, "Do you like our pyramid?" "Yes, it's very beautiful." It's like a scar on the face of Paris. So that allows you to know that there's something seriously wrong with this guy. He does not, he cares only for the job. And then as they're walking through the main concourse of the Louvre, you see two pyramids that are geometric opposites, the glass one and the stone one. What you don't know is that those two pyramids are extremely important to the story, but later on. So, we are also introduced to Langdon's claustrophobia in the scene where Jean Reno wants to take him into an elevator to go down to the Grand Gallery. And I love how it is well displayed with close-up shots, and the blur around the edges of the camera sells you that that Langdon has claustrophobia. He is deeply uncomfortable in this elevator. And the only problem with this scene is when the elevator finally opens. A person with claustrophobia, La Femme Nikita is Jean Reno at his best before Leon. Yeah. I'll have to take a look at it. Now, as I was saying, for a claustrophobe, if they're in an elevator and they absolutely are feeling cut off, one thing that most claustrophobes cannot do is hold it together. I have seen claustrophobes in elevators before. The one thing that all of the people who I know to be claustrophobes do when an elevator door opens, they rush out. They get out of there because of how uncomfortable it is. Some of them do it with grace. Some of them do it not so gracefully. Some of them just rush right out. In this movie, Tom Hanks waits a beat and then exits the elevator. A claustrophobe does not do that. Not unless they have incredible discipline over their fear. But considering the trauma that Langdon has, which is the root cause of his claustrophobia, it makes one wonder, does he truly have it, you know? So, I also like, as they are walking through, we see a security camera in the Louvre. And he's like, "Are those real?" And he's like, "Of course not." So I thought security in the Louvre would that would be very cost prohibitive. The cameras are fake because They rely on keeping people in with closing gates. If you trigger an alarm, the gates in that area at the doorways will seal you in. So when you are coming in, say to steal a painting or to deface a painting, they have sensors all around those paintings. You trip one of them, you're stuck in there. You're not getting out. The Louvre is basically a veritable Fort Knox for art. And even now, they have even higher security measures. So as they are going through, or just before they go through the closing or the gates that Saunier is in the Grand Gallery, we cut to a scene in a Vatican jet where Bishop Angarosa, or Arangarosa, played by God dang it, Alfred Molina, is doing a mock-up press release or press where he's being asked very tough questions about Opus Dei, which is and its rigorous following of Catholic doctrine. They ask about the self-flagellation in the Salice. They ask about extremely harsh questions about Opus Dei, how they're referred to as God's mafia. And he fields the questions as best as he can. He tells them, he fields it actually very well. Then afterward, he receives a call from the teacher. In Latin, they call him rector, telling that his bargain is nearly fulfilled. And then we get a cut back to the Louvre. Saunier is posed as the Vitruvian Man. Now, obviously, this is not the old man himself. This is a fake version of him. But they also they have a very bright light over his genitals because, well, obvious reasons. And you see a 5-point star written in blood on his chest. And when when Jean Reno asks him, Jean Reno asks Langdon about it, he's like, it's a pentacle. Devil worship. No, the pentacle, that's the second universe pentacle. The first was the pagan sign for Venus, the goddess Venus. And Saunier would know that this is not, or that has nothing to do with the devil. He's like, is that so? Well, then what do you make of this? And he shows him with a black light a message that was written by Saunier. And it says, O draconian devil, O lame saint. And then the numbers 12, 3, 2, 21, 1, 1, 8, 5. Now, if anybody knows anything about those numbers, everybody knows that those are the Fibonacci, or that's the Fibonacci sequence taken out of sequence. And he asks him, why do you suppose, or would somebody do in their last moments? I suppose try to identify the killer. Precisimo, precisimo. And we then see that Foch is about to make his pitch, except he's interrupted by Audrey Tauto's character, Sophie Neveu. Now, I believe this is her first acting job in an American blockbuster or an American film. I gotta say, she is very well done in this movie. Her acting is pretty good, considering what her character goes through, who her character is, what her character has seen. And this young woman, Audrey Tautou, plays this character very well, almost as if it was tailor-made for her. I'm not exaggerating when I say that either. So she has a message for Langdon, which he almost screws up because she says she interrupts him. She's like, oh no, that's the right number. You have to dial a 3-digit code. And he's like, but or it's on the piece of paper that I gave you. She's interrupting him to get him so he doesn't talk and spill the guts. Because, hold on one second. There was something on my keyboard that I needed to get off. And so when he's listening to it, it's Sophie Neveu who left a message on her own messaging service so that she could tell Langdon, you're in grave danger. Do not trust Fash. And whatever you do, do not say anything to him. So we are then cut to a nun receiving a call at the Church of Saint Sulpice to expect a visitor from Opus Dei. Now, after that scene, we go back to Langdon, and he uses the bathroom. He comes up with a story to use the bathroom, and Sophie is in there waiting for him, saying, do you have a message from Jacques Saunier? He's obviously oblivious. And she's like, crazy old man. She doesn't like Saunier, so this is now established. And she then tells Langdon the truth of why he's there. Fash believes Langdon is guilty. And the police have him as a suspect and are hoping that he incriminates himself. And she tells him to check his pocket, which there's a GPS tracking dot. And then she shows him the hidden fourth line. P.S. Find Robert Langdon. Which Fash removed before Langdon got there. So, we cut to a big truck going by. Sorry if anybody can hear that. So we cut to another scene which shows the police looking at the tracking dots locator signal on the computer. And he's like, what is he doing in there, huh? I mean, why is he in there and whatnot? And then they find out that Neveu was never called from cryptology or sent there. Isn't that interesting? And then we see the tracking dot take a flying leap. We also it's also revealed that Sophie is Jacques Saunier's granddaughter. And she believes that Sophie wanted, or Saunier wanted Sophie on the case, which is why she wrote the Fibonacci sequence, or which is why he wrote the Fibonacci sequence out of order, because it would involve cryptology being involved, which he knows that she was in. Now, Colette and Fash figure out that Sophie was not sent by the department. Trigger's on the move, suggesting Langdon jumped. A chase ensues. The police find the dot on the back of a sand truck, and then they call the cop that was left at the place because they realize Sophie and Langdon are still in the Louvre. Sophie takes a moment, and we see glimpses of her past, and we realize, and then while she is thinking, Langdon realizes O Draconian Devil, O Lame Saint is not what it meant, or the message. The message is an anagram. The Mona Lisa, or Leonardo da Vinci, the Mona Lisa. And then we have to go to Madonna on the Rocks with the Dark Con of Man message that was found by Mona Lisa. And then we get a cop holding or trying to stop them, and Sophie holds a painting hostage. And and they find a fleur-de-lis key, or a key with the fleur-de-lis on top. And she's about to cut or mar a painting. And it's like, oh my God, this cop won't shoot. This cop drops the gun, slides it over, and they escape. Now, after they escape, Langdon questions Sophie. And he's like, has your father ever, or did your grandfather ever talk to you about something called the Priory of Scion? And she's like, why are you asking me this? And he tells her, they guard the secret that they refer to as the dark con of man. They protect the source of God's power on earth. We know it as the Holy Grail. And then we see another chase, and they're trying to get to the embassy where Fash cannot arrest them. We then see Silas, after the chase is, they get away from the police, we're cut to Silas arriving at St. Sulpice. He's in a car and he's talking to himself, and we get glimpses of his past through flashbacks where he's an albino and his father was abusing his mother, and he got up to defend her, which he ends up killing his father. And his father says, "You are a ghost," in Spanish, because he's from Spain. And we see that he is in jail for his for what is going to be the rest of his life, except that an earthquake shakes and collapses his cell. So he escapes, and Bishop Angarosa finds him in Spain and nurses him back to health. He then saves Angarosa later on from thieves who are defacing the church. And we then get snapped back to the present. And he enters St. Sulpice, where the nun talks about the history of the Rose Line and the first prime meridian, which passes through the church. There are 135 brass markers set into Paris. The sister then overhears and reacts to Silas say it hides beneath the rose. Her reaction basically says it all. This man is here under a dark purpose, because it is about a dark con of man. So he sends the nun off so he can pray and do what he is also there for. And we are then cut back to Fash yelling at the cop from the Louvre. He's like, "You should have shot the frickin' painting. You should have you should have destroyed the damn painting to stop them." And Colette he's like, "Dude, are you sure these guys are guilty?" And Fash is absolutely sure. He is just so sure that Langdon is guilty. He doesn't say why. He just knows that Langdon is guilty. And he will say nothing of it to Colette. So we then see Sophie and Langdon go to a park where the police obviously do not patrol. There's all sorts of prostitution, drugs, and whatnot being done there. And cutting back to St. Sulpice, where there is, where Silas busts the floor of the St. Sulpice to find a humongous hexagonal stone marker reading Job 38:11. Sophia and Langdon then discuss Sophie's past and the hidden story of the Holy Grail, after she sends off a druggie with 50 euros. Now, this scene where Sophie stares down the attic before they start discussing the stuff, it hints that Sophie is special, that Sophie has some sort of ability that is unexplainable. Now, we are then told about the French Crusade to take Israel, and how the Knights Templar found something, and either the papacy bought their silence or the Knights Templar blackmailed the papacy. But they received, or either way, they received limitless power. Now, 300 years later, in the 1300s, the papacy then decided to betray the Templars and kill them all across Europe, Order 66 style. The date in which this occurs is October 13th, 1307, which was a Friday, the origin of Friday the 13th, in this movie. The Templar treasure then vanished because there were survivors that made it out. And when Sophie's like, "I've never heard of any of this," Yes, you have. In fact, everybody across the world has. You only know it as the Holy Grail. So, we now know what the big MacGuffin is in this movie. And I gotta say that these scenes are actually played quite well, because when Tom Hanks goes into a long speech or narration, he does it very well. And he explains it in a way that even lay people can understand. So when or after they reveal the Holy Grail, or the story of the Holy Grail is finished, the nun who helped Silas into Saint Sulpice is calling a list of people who are no longer there, and she tried calling Jacques Saunier, saying that the lie has been told. Please pick up the phone. Nobody, or I feel the guardians are all dead. Please, sir, pick up the phone. And, well, Silas catches her, and he asks her, Job 38:11, do you know what it is, sister? And hitherto shalt thou come, but no further. And because Silas knows that she's conspiring with the Priory, he kills her. He smashes her head with the humongous stone that he pulled out of the rubble. And then we get to the Council of Shadows, which Bishop Arangarosa attended, and how they squabble with Arangarosa, and how one of them is talking about how dare you presume this and this and this, and he's like, I do not presume, I act. For years we've been, Hanks and later McKellen delivered the exposition exactly. And when I got a mosquito in here. Been hoping that these things would stop coming in, but I'm going to have to find a way to make sure that they don't come in anymore. Oh, I hate mosquitoes, folks. It's mosquito season, and I hate mosquitoes. Hello, O'Brien. Thank you for leaving a like. So, yes, we get further into it, and the Council of Shadow needs 20 million euro in untraceable bearer bonds for this teacher who helped them silence the Priory of Scion, and they seek to destroy the Holy Grail because they know exactly what the real Holy Grail is. It's not a cup, contrary to popular belief. Langdon and Sophie are spotted in the park, which then goes down the line to the police, and they end up walking to a Swiss bank, 24 Haxo, which is part of the fleur-de-lis key that Sophie has. And we are introduced to Vernet, the manager of the Swiss bank. Also, the security desk agent notices that they are on the most wanted list. In France, that is. And he makes note of it, and then he plays the manager, explains the protocol of the key, how you can only push or your account number, punch it in. If you punch it in wrong, the entire system is disabled. So they take the Fibonacci sequence, unscrambled, and you hear Sophie say the most particular thing, how she doesn't like history, and how she is kind of averse to it. Well, while they are, or after they open the box, Vernet shows up when the police are showing up, and he's like, your box has an escape clause or a safe passage clause. So they put them in an armored car, and Vernet helps them escape. Now, outside of the bank, Colette is talking with Vernet because he stops him. He's like, have you seen these two? He's like, have you seen these two? They are wanted criminals. He's like, well, you've come to the right place. We're all criminals here. And he's like, do you mind? I'm kind of on a timely schedule. And he's like, and do all drivers wear a Rolex? He's like, what? This shit? I got it in Barbès for 50 euros. Yours for 35. And he tries bribing Colette, and Colette sends him on his way, realizing they're not there. And we're cut back to the Opus Dei Council, waiting for the teacher's call. And cut back to Silas preparing to whip himself again for killing the nun. And we see, as he's preparing himself, we see flashbacks. I like how when you are seeing these flashbacks, the color is diluted and desaturated, making it more white and blue. And then he gets ready to whip himself. JM 2021, good to see you. Had to get that off my chest. No, that's off topic, but I had to say that. I'm not. This is this is the only comment that I'm seeing, so I'm gonna have to go to YouTube to see what you were saying. Hopefully, it's actually still there. Because apparently there is no... Alrighty, now let's mute. Chat. And come on, load up the chat. Yeah, I'm not seeing your comment there, buddy. RJ. Let me see if live chat sets it up. Apparently, yeah, it didn't go through. So, sorry about that, Jay. I'm not seeing what you were saying. Alrighty, so let's continue. Now, we're in the back of the truck, the armored car with Robert, and he is visibly uncomfortable. And he is, she's like, are you all right? And he's like, yeah, why don't you open that up, see what's what? And she sees that it's a cryptex. And she explains that it's designed by Leonardo da Vinci. However, in real life, there is no evidence that Leonardo da Vinci created or designed such a device. But she explains what it is, how it's a secret case that guards any secret. You write something on a papyrus scroll and you put it inside of a thing that's surrounded by a glass vial, surrounded by filled with vinegar. And if you try to force it open, the vial breaks, destroying the papyrus. Whatever secret you hid in there is now lost. And then there's more bumps and stuff that's agitating Langdon, and she's like, you're not all right. Let me try something. I don't know why it works, but it works. My mother used to do it. So she puts her hands to his head, and you see Sophie's past, in which her mother does the same thing. And you also see her mother, or after her mother pulls away, you see a truck smash the front of their vehicle from the back seat as you're looking out. And then you see Saunier carrying her from the car crash. So after he feels better, the armored car stops, and Vernay pulls a gun on him, saying, I've been waiting for 20 years for somebody to come for that box, and it's you two murderers. Nobody's going to miss anybody on a killing spree. So he forces them to bring the box to them, and Tom Hanks, Langdon, shuffles the bullet case that he fires, or after he fired or shot, to let him know that he means business. Well, he uses that bullet cartridge and puts it in the grill of the vehicle to stop him from closing it. So when he's trying to close the door, Langdon and Sophie escape, injuring Vernay, giving him quite a serious head wound. And I love how they have another little bit of extra here where they say that, or she's sticks her head out the window and she's like, that always used to help me calm me down and whatnot. And then he's like, okay, Sophie, you need to tell me what happened between you and your grandfather. I've been shot at, I'm bleeding, and I jammed my shoulder. What is going on? And she's like, what do you mean? Your grandfather is grooming you for the Priory. He gave you puzzles and cryptex as a child. And what else? Hold on. I'm usually pretty good at talking about him. And he grills her about her history. So she's like, nobody hates history. They hate their own history. That is actually a very powerful line, which actually rings very true as well, where people do. They hate their own history. They don't, or if they don't like their own history, they will not, or they say they hate history. So, he's like, I'm out of my field here. I'm gonna have to take you to Sir Lee Teabing. He's a Grail historian. He's an Englishman living in France. So we're then cut to Vernay in the hospital, and Fash convinces him to activate the homing beacon inside of the armored truck. And then we are introduced to Sir Ian McKellen as Sir Lee Teabing. I love the introduction of this, where they arrive at Chateau Villette, and he gives them 3 questions. He's like, first, coffee or tea? Tea. Milk or lemon? That would depend on the tea. And final question, in what year did an Oxford grad outrow somebody else at Henley? Surely a travesty has not occurred. That line was was actually quite funny to hear, and so they let him into Chateau Villette, and we're introduced to Lee Teabing, played by the brilliant actor Sir Ian McKellen, and he's like, you didn't tell me you were bringing a maiden. He's very knightly and whatnot, eccentric sort of. And he's like, then looks to Robert, Earl Grey, milk or lemon. He's like, correct. So he then asks them, now you'll notice that he walks with 2 canes. Obviously, Sir Lee Teabing had polio when he was younger, which made it harder for him to walk. That is, or at least that is what is suggested. And the scene between Teabing, Sophie, and Langdon is one of the best scenes in cinematic history, in my opinion, because how they describe it, how they discuss it, it's as if they are not acting, because they're acting in a way that makes you believe everything they are saying is actually a conversation that happens in the real world. And they're talking about the Priory of Scion and the history of their protection of God's power on earth, and Teabing stops. He's like, no, they protect the source of the church's power on earth. And she's like, for what? Magical dishes? Did Robert make you think the Holy Grail is a cup? And so they just start to discuss the history that is out there, or the history that people haven't really discussed. So we also get a shot of Fash calling Aaron Garosa, the bishop, who is also Opus Dei. So we know that Fash and Aaron Garosa are somehow linked. And then we see that Silas is also told where they are as well on the phone. Now, the Holy Grail is not a cup, according to this, which is fiction. Now, I do want to point this out, folks, that in the movie, which is fiction, they discuss things, but to me, it's fiction that is written very well, to the point where it could almost be contested history. But I still do acknowledge that it is indeed fiction. Now, the Holy Grail is not a cup, according to this. The Roman Emperor Constantine was a lifelong pagan and was baptized on his deathbed. After the crucifixion, war was waged between the Christians and the pagans. However, nobody knew who started it. And Constantine had to think about what was best for Rome. It was being torn apart, and Christianity was on the rise. So he was a pragmatist. He chose to adopt Christianity in Rome. Now, we then get introduced to the Council of Nicaea, where the united sects of Christianity came together to determine many things. The immortality of Jesus was the most debated. He was seen as mortal man by some, and he was seen as divine by others. And Constantine chose to follow the doctrine that Jesus was divine. They denied any gospels that suggested that Jesus was merely a man, not the Son of God. So, the Nicene Creed basically would always argue over that. Now, he then says, "Let me show you the Grail." And we get introduced to the great fresco of Leonardo da Vinci and Teabing's Indulgences, The Last Supper. Now, I actually have a very detailed photo here of The Last Supper, which I will share with you all. And just in case anybody from the Louvre decides to say you can't do that, I do not own the Last Supper painting, yada, yada, yada. It belongs to whoever is the owner of the Last Supper. So, yes, this is a painting, and I'm actually going to go full screen here. And I'm going to go even more full screen by changing the settings on my camera. Where, let's see here, layouts. There. Now, this is indeed the Last Supper. And he asks her, or close your eyes, my dear. Now, where is Jesus? In the middle. What are they drinking? Wine. And it's in the Holy Grail, or in the middle of the Holy Grail. Open your eyes. Not one cup. Now, if you look at this photograph or this painting, this is a painting done by Davinci, The Last Supper. And let me zoom in a little bit further. This is odd because apparently, if you look at this painting, you are seeing clear cups, clear glasses. Now, I'm guessing this is not the real Last Supper painting because there's other ones there too. More clear cups. Now let's zoom out. Now, there is no cup where Jesus is. Well, except for that one right here. Or two, rather. Now, we also get, they draw the most attention to this area of the painting. And we understand that Mary Magdalene is one of the people in this painting, the 12 disciples of Jesus Christ. However, there was a 13th disciple known as Judas Iscariot. And let's see here. We are then introduced to the blade and the chalice. Now, the blade is or man and woman. The chalice is a symbol for woman. A woman who is said to be in the Last Supper painting, Mary Magdalene, allegedly the wife of Jesus. And I love how they go through this. They're like, she's like, who is she? My dear, that is Mary Magdalene. The prostitute? She was no such thing. Defamed in some year, Anno Domini, poor dear. Mary was Jesus' wife. Now, they then explain that there was no talk of marriage, but Mary Magdalene was written apparently in a gospel according to Philip, that she was the companion of their Savior. Now, back in those days, companion literally meant spouse. So, you see this negative space between them. So let me show you with the marker here, the mouse thing. It comes up as unfortunately, a magnifying glass. Sorry, folks, I'm kind of slipping on what words are here. You see the negative space creates an image, a shape of an upside down triangle. The chalice, the symbol for woman. Apparently, this has significance in the movie, as they discuss that this is the definitive arrival of the Holy Grail. Now, they then delve into the far more bizarre. The French word for Holy Grail is Sangreal. Break it into Sangreal means royal blood as well. Allegedly, Mary was pregnant at the time of the crucifixion and fled from France, where she fled to France from the Holy Land, where she gave birth to a daughter named Sarah. Now, I love what they say to this, that Tom Hanks, he's like, a little girl. Yes? If that's true, then that's adding insult to injury. Why? Because in paganism, people found transcendency through the joining of male and female. And I love what she says. People found God through sex? And so they say, in paganism, women were worshipped as the route to heaven. But the Catholic Church had a monopoly on that, salvation through the worship of Jesus Christ. So this led to the Catholic Inquisition and the most, in quotes, the most blood-soaked book in human history, known as the Malea Maleficarum. Now, believe me, folks, it's also known as the Witch's Hammer. This is not outside of the realm of possibility. The Malea Maleficarum was basically a book that taught the church how to round up and kill, in a span of 300 years, over 50,000 to millions of free-thinking women. The slaughter of all free-thinking women by the Catholic Church. It was known as the Catholic Inquisition. And they were defamed as witches, which led to the justification for their killing. Now, in conclusion of this entire story, the Priory are the guardians of the greatest cover-up in human history. If the secret ever got out, it would obliterate and devastate the foundations of the Christian and Catholic religions. They are the defenders of Christ's living bloodline. Now imagine, just imagine if, for a moment, folks, suspend the notions of any religious notions that you have. Just imagine that if this was actually true. How you doing, Ruben? Good to see you. Thank you for stopping in. Imagine that if the church was meant to go to Mary Magdalene, not to Peter. Imagine that the church was meant to be carried on by a woman, and that Jesus also had an heir. Imagine all of this if this was to be revealed to the world, and that the Catholic Church slaughtered people to protect this, so that this couldn't get out. The world would suffer a crisis of faith never before seen in history. The Catholic Church would have its entire doctrine thrown into question, and there would be so many problems going on in the world. A crisis or the Catholic Church is the largest and most imperial religion out there. Now, I say imperial not as a fascist organization, well, in some cases it is, but it is the largest religion that has a literal governance leadership with the papacy. So imagine that, just imagine for a moment that entire governance that has been around for 17 to 1800 years, having everything that you know about it thrown to the wind as false. Can you imagine the ramifications? It would devastate the world. There would be such a crisis of faith that cannot be recovered from. And that is why people are killing, or in this movie, that is why people are trying to stop the Priory of Scion, because they hold the secret to the greatest cover-up in human history, according to this story. Now, we then get further into it, and I'm going back to my talking points. At this time, Teabing is called by Remy, and he says they're on the news now. And while Sophie and Langdon are talking, he's like, you have not been honest with me. You are on the television. You're implicated in 4 murders. And while Langdon also said earlier in the film, just before they came into Chateau Valette, that they have to keep the Keystone hidden for now. Well, now that Teabing is ready to no longer cooperate, he's like, what if Jacques Saunier was a grandfather? Consider, Lee, you are the greatest historian, or Grail historian. Consider, the 3 Seneschaux dead, the Grand Master, or what if the Priory was compromised? The 3 Seneschaux dead. You would have to earn, she was being groomed for the Priory in order to carry it on. But her training was never finished. And he's like, your ruse is pathetic. Well, he then pulls out the cryptext, which they refer to as the Keystone. We also see that Silas has arrived in Chateau Valette, and he is watching this whole thing play out. And the police also arrive, but have been ordered to wait for Fash to arrive. Well, they then hold, or it is said that the Keystone holds a map to the Holy Grail. Sophie remembers her grandfather what her grandfather was teaching her about being able to, or riddle songs, and being able to keep a secret and never speak of it again. And this is when Silas attacks. Well, a gunshot from his gun forces the police to act, ripping down the gate, and they stop Silas from hurting people. Teabing does it, noticing that his footwear, you see running blood on his footwear, or dried blood on his footwear. And so he smacks him in the leg where the silice is. Now, this is called perpetual pain, folks. If you have perpetual pain where you are constantly hurting because you have barbs cutting into your flesh, and let me just realign my chair here, and you get hit in that spot where the pain is, you're going to collapse like a house of cards. I'm telling you right now. So he's like, fortunately, this is a dragon easy to slay. He's wearing a cilice. And you see how Tom Hanks is Langdon. He's like, oh my God, he suffers like, or as Christ suffered. Opus Dei. And he's like, fascist Opus Dei. I saw the cross of the world on his lapel. And so they realize they got to get the heck out of there, because the police, or he's like, you want what's in this box? Help us. So they're driving through the woods, and they use the intercom in the house to escape or to fool the police and escape. Now, they also describe what Opus Dei is, how it is a conservative sect and a prelature to the Vatican, and that they're in the middle of a war. Imagine the greatest cover-up, and what if scientific evidence could disprove Catholic doctrine? The Vatican can't afford such a scandal. So, yeah. Also, I love how when Silas wakes up, he starts kidding around. He's like, I don't know why you're so upset. By rights, I could shoot you right now and leave you to rot in my woods. And they're like, we may need him, put the gun away. And so they have Teabing call and fuel the jet. And he's like, for Zurich. Yes, we love Zurich. Yeah, just have it ready for us. Yeah. And so they get on they manage to avoid the police, and they escape onto the plane. So Fash is then called out by Colette when when Fash arrives, and he's saying, you guys are useless, you let them get away. And Colette is like, no, you let them get away. You've been overseeing every aspect of this investigation. What is going on? And he tells him, stay out of my way. Well, on the plane, Sophie then goes over to Silas and starts smacking him. And she's like, did you kill Jacques Saunier? I'm a messenger of God. Smack. Did you kill my grandfather? I'm a messenger. Smack. Each breath you take is a sin. No shadow will be ever safe again, for you will be hunted by angels. And she tells him, you think that your God forgives murderers? No, he burns them. Telling you that she's not, she doesn't believe in God. She's not religious. So then further in, we see that the bearer bonds have been given to Arangarosa, and that the Council of Shadows does not exist, because they will have to destroy the sarcophagus, and if they have to perform the final edict, they will, on the air, if indeed they are discovered. Well, we then get a nice scene that is not in the theatrical, where Sophie still doesn't want to believe in her grandfather. A little girl with no gift at the end, she says. And that Robert Langdon is willing to stay and help. She tells him, Go to your embassy. Get out. Go back and live your life. And he's like, no, your grandfather brought me in for a reason. I'm going to help you. So then we see Fash assault the tower guard or the flight controller because he's on break and he doesn't want. And he's like, come back in 10 minutes, please. And he's like, the flight plan, s'il vous plaît. And he starts kicking him and assaulting him and breaking his nose and whatnot. And then we are brought back to the plane where Magdalene's they talk about how Magdalene's sarcophagus was lost to time, and that to kneel at her sarcophagus was the greatest honor for the Knights Templar. And then we are introduced to a new clue with mirrored words backwards, as Leonardo da Vinci was reportedly dyslexic. So in London lies a knight, a pope interred, his labor's fruit a holy wrath incurred. You seek the orb that ought be on his tomb. It speaks of rosy flesh and seeded womb. So instead of going to Zurich, they decide to go to London now. They're on a grail quest, and Fash is angry that he lost Langdon to Switzerland. And Colette decides to... Stupid mosquito. I hate mosquitoes. I really freaking hate them. And so he asks, his reasoning of why he is going so hard after Langdon. And Fash tells him that a bishop of it, or he knows that he's Opus Dei, and that a bishop of his order contacted him, broke his vows to tell him that Langdon had come to him in confession and that he had killed somebody and that he would keep killing. He basically made up a story to implicate Langdon. This bishop did. And he tells, so Colette understands, he's like, next time, just tell me. And this entire acting sequence with Jean Reno is so well done. It was award-worthy back then, and I don't think it ever got an award. So Colette then tells him they changed the flight plan to London, which puts Fash back on the trail. And that Colette would take care of the flight controller, because the flight controller is also going to file charges for being assaulted by a cop. So as they arrive in London, they fool the police, flipping and I love how they show what happens after the scene is done, where they show how they get off the plane, how they went into the hangar and got into the car before the plane, or as the plane was turning around. And then we see Teeping playing a game with the cops, and he's like, "Armed police, we see that there's two." Yeah, exactly. The hangar switch is so great, and Price is Right. Good to see you. And he's like, "I'm late for a very important appointment, and if you want to stop us, you're just going to have to shoot us. You can start with him." He refers to Remy as butler, and I just love that. So they search the plane. Bad tip: the French cannot be trusted. And then they show you how they got into the back of the car while the plane was turning around and whatnot. And that whole scene was just it was a good laugh out of it. So then the teacher calls Aringarosa, and how the council will be excommunicated if the Vatican discovers them. And we then are brought back to them where Langdon's claustrophobia is explained. Teabing explains to Sophie that he fell into a well, and how he had screamed for a day and a night, and that is why he has the claustrophobia. Well, unbeknownst to Lee, his claustrophobia was miraculously cured by Sophie. And so as they're looking for the orbs that are in the temple church are on the effigies of the tombs, or what they perceive to be tombs. They're like, these aren't tombs, they're effigies. And Sophie realizes she should not, or they shouldn't be there, but, well, Silas and Remy are now in the place, and Remy betrays them, and he's the one that freed Silas. And he smacks Teabing, knocking him down, and you see Teabing cowering like an old man. And while Silas is rounding up Teabing to put him in the trunk of the car, birds or pigeons end up flying down to distract Remy from shooting Langdon and Sophie. And so they escape. And this is where everything starts to coalesce ever so slowly, but very, very quickly starts to make sense. After they escape, we get a shot of Colette inspecting Chateau Valette, and they find a listening post with extremely sophisticated surveillance equipment and discs with the names of the Seneschal and the Grand Master Jacques Saunier. Remy then reveals that he is the teacher to Silas before sending him into an Opus Dei house. On a bus, we see Robert and Sophie learning from a guy's cell phone that Alexander Pope is a pope, and this is intercut with Remy being killed by Teabing, because Teabing is the real teacher, and he then calls in a tip that he knows the location of two murderers, and they are hiding at an Opus Dei house. Well, Ledoux, or Fash, is already in London, ready to find the killers and put this case to rest. So we learn that in London lies a knight, a pope, interred. A meaning the first letter, or the first initial, Alexander Pope. He presided over the funeral of his good friend, Sir Isaac Newton, a knight, whose work with the Catholic Church, his own work actually got him in trouble with the Catholic Church. Science and gravity and whatnot. Now, when they get to his tomb, or Sir Isaac Newton's tomb in the church, well, they realized that Teabing was there, because hopefully I got it now. Yep, I did. And yuck. So, sorry, mosquitoes, folks. I don't know how they're getting in my house, but then again, I live in a 100-year-old house. So, yeah. So, we then see that Teabing's feet and cane marks, or footprints and cane marks, are in there, and he reveals himself to them. And he reveals that he is the teacher, the real teacher. And he tells them that, or hold on a minute. Or he says, I do what I have to now, as he pulls the gun. Or pulls the gun and he's like, I do what I have to now, anything. So then we're cut to Silas at the Opus Dei house after he has just chastised himself again. And the police arrive, and Aaron Garosa arrives there as well, intercut with Silas's last stand and the shots, and he shoots Aaron Garosa by accident when he's shooting the armed police there. And they were betrayed by Teabing, which Aaron Garosa tells Silas. And Silas is obviously broken up over this, and he lifts his empty gun at the police, which the police then gun him down. So we then learn by Teabing that the Priory was supposed to reveal the heir to Christ at the dawn of the millennium in the year 2000. Well, the millennium came and went, and the heir never came forth, forcing him to take matters into his own hands. He then sought out the enemy. He referred to himself as teacher. He asked for money so that they wouldn't be suspicious. And let's see here. Okay. And he then forces them to, or tries to force Sophie to solve the cryptext. She doesn't know how, so Langdon decides to do it, and he tries to do it. And I love this scene. The scene showing Langdon solving it with Zimmer's score and seeing how history flows around him, and Newton's work. It is so beautiful. And then it is, then it just suddenly stops. And then he's like, "I'm sorry. I am sorry." And then he throws the cryptext up in the air, forcing Teabing to go after it. And he drops his canes running after the cryptext, catches it, but because of his disability, he drops to his knees and his arm falls over, piercing the cryptext, causing whatever was in it to be consumed by the vinegar. And that's when the police show up, and they're like, and you see Fash, he's like, "Him, the old man." And they also Sophie also had the gun pointing at Teabing because, well, she is a cop and whatnot, but she also ends up dropping it. Now, there's a scene in the extended edition. Originally, I thought the scene took place at the police station. It actually doesn't. It actually takes place inside an office in the same building that they were just in after they had just arrested Teabing. Now, it's a scene with Fash apologizing to Robert, saying, "You're obviously free to go," and that I was used. And that earlier he realized, or when Aaron Garosa was being hauled into an ambulance, he's like, "Where's Silas? The monk? How do you know his first name?" And he's like, "I can't be implicated here. There's so much work to be done." He's like, "Langdon never came to you for confession, did he? You used me." And so then he tells him, he's like, "Your Silas is dead." So then after that, or during this scene, he tells him, I cannot even begin to understand why he did, or why Teabing did what he did. And we see all the evidence on the table, and telling him that he even killed Remy, his own butler, with poison down at the docks. So then we get to the scene that is in the theatrical where they're bringing Teabing out, and he's yelling at Langdon. He's like, "How could you? How to destroy our hopes and dreams and whatnot?" And he's like, "How could you do it?" And because Langdon's not really reacting, it's basically saying everything he suspects. He's like, "You couldn't. You actually solved it." And he sounds like a raving lunatic, which is basically what everybody else is looking at. He's like, sounds like a raving lunatic. He's like, "That man has a map to the Holy Grail. You know what to do. You got to set her free upon the world and whatnot." He sounds like a raving lunatic. And then Sophie's looking at him. He's like, "There was every orb conceivable on that tomb except for one with rosy flesh and a seeded womb, the one that inspired Newton's work, which was APPLE, 5 letters, which is the code to the cryptext, the apple." And we get another riddle. "The Holy Grail 'neath ancient Roslyn waits, the blade and chalice guarding o'er her gates. Adorned in master's loving art she lies, she rests at least beneath the starry skies. So they go to Rosslyn Chapel, and we learn about the joke that Saunier made at made at Langdon's expense. I forgot to talk about that earlier when they were talking about, or when he's like, why do you think that Saunier asked you? He once made a joke at my expense. It was pretty funny. And so the joke was, he called him a flatfoot of history, a beat cop, basically, who only did his job. And he's like, well, I never thought that Saunier liked me. And so Sophie actually tells him that wasn't a joke. That was actually a pretty high praise coming from Saunier, because his father was a cop, a beat cop, and he was the most honorable man he had ever known. So they get into the church or into the chapel, rather, sorry. And we learn, or they find the Star of David, which is the union of the chalice and the blade, fused as one. The manager of the church recognizes them, and we then go down into an area where there's unknown works by Leonardo da Vinci. And then they locate a hidden tomb where the Holy Grail was last stored, but no more. They find the Grail documents, and during this scene, you see that people are starting to arrive. And Sophie explains why she ran away, because she also recognizes that she was there once as a child inside that very chapel, and that Saunier had yelled at her vehemently for looking into her family. So that is why she ran away and got sent to boarding school. Well, she came back unexpectedly and witnessed a sexual ritual of paganism, which Saunier was personally taking part in. And that is why she stopped talking with him. Well, then we realized that Saunier was not her grandfather, it turns out. A report of the entire family was killed, including Sophie herself. But her name was not Saunier, it was Saint Clair, one of the oldest lines of the Merovingian kings. And that is why Saunier called her Princess Sophie, revealing that she is indeed the last living descendant of Jesus Christ in the movie. And it's like, this scene, how it is portrayed, how it is acted, it is like, how do you drop that bomb on somebody? How is that? That is quite a bomb to drop, you know? And then they come up to see, out of that whole place, it's filled with people. And Sophie's grandmother is part of that group. So she explains to Sophie what all those people are there for, to protect her, essentially. She is the last living descendant of Jesus Christ. Well, aside from her grandmother, I guess. Unless her grandmother is not part of the direct line. So then we get to outside, where Sophie talks with Langdon, and when Langdon was in the well and the location of the sarcophagus was lost with Saunier's death, he talks about how her healing gift may be part of her lineage. The question is then brought up, will you renew faith or destroy it? And she doesn't really know yet. But as she's walking away, she's like, hey, and then she does that little joke about trying to walk on water. And she's like, well, maybe I'll have more luck with the wine, turning water into wine being one of the things that Jesus did. So then we go back to Paris, where Langdon is now no longer implicated. He's able to finish his work, and he's shaving, and then he accidentally cuts himself. Well, the drop drips down, and you see it running in a line down to the sink. And he figures it out, hides beneath the rose. Bloodline, rose line, Rosalind. And this, or how the score starts to swell as he travels the first rose line. It is such a beautiful scene. It actually brought tears to my eyes and still does bring tears to my eyes this day, where he then, or you hear him narrating, the Holy Grail neath ancient Rosalind waits, the blade and chalice guarding o'er her gates. The blade and chalice in this case being what I discussed earlier in the review, the two pyramids, the glass one that was pointing downward and the pyramid that was pointing upward. Adorned in master's loving art, she lies. They're in the Louvre. She rests at last beneath starry skies. Above is a beautiful starry sky at night. And we see him go over the exact spot where the Magdalene's sarcophagus is. And they go down and showing, having the last name St. Clair, this scene is always fun to watch. That's pretty cool. Dan Blackroy, did not know that your last name was St. Clair. However, St. Clair for them is fully spelt out. It's not shortened with ST. And it's also hyphenated. So when they go down swelling with the score just swelling as it reveals that the sarcophagus is actually underneath the Louvre, in that exact spot where Langdon is kneeling now, and he starts praying, and it cuts to the credits, or rolls credits. This movie is so beautiful. Yes, there are a lot of people in the Catholic faith who absolutely hate this movie. There are some other people. I would actually like to discuss this movie with Odin from OMB Reviews. He's a Catholic. He's an Orthodox Catholic. He is a teacher as well. I would actually like to discuss it with him, just to pick his mind about it, I'm going to actually have to ask him about it sometime. But yeah, when it comes to this movie's objective quality, with the theatrical, I would put this movie about a 7.5. There are issues with pacing, and the cutting kind of does screw with it. And it does kind of get a little bit drawn out. But however, with the added context of the extended edition, I would actually put this movie at more of an 8 to an 8.5. With the added context and the additional scenes, it really does bring more breadth to it, and you accept the pacing now that more of the story is told. The score, the acting, the cast, the directing of Ron Howard is very well done. Subjectively, this movie is a 9.5 out of 10. There are a couple things that could have been done a little bit differently. There are a couple things that don't make sense. However, if you think about it, it does kind of make sense, but only if you purely think about it. Moviegoer, if you like 3-hour long movies, you won't have a problem with this movie. If you like mysteries and whatnot, this movie is definitely for you. But however, there might be pacing issues that you might not like. So out of an entertainment quality, this movie is about a 9 out of 10, maybe down to an 8.5 depending on your preference. The Davinci Code is a very good movie. I enjoyed it. I liked watching it. It's a movie that resonates with me. And I truly do love the score by Ron Zimmerman. Rare case where the movie is as good or better than the book. Angels and Demons, the book is much better. Oh, yes. When it comes to, I've read the Angels and Demons book while I was incarcerated. And that book was pure freaking awesome. I actually once had a thought about actually getting the tattoos of each one of those things, not the Illuminati, but the 4 element burns, where they're the same upside down and right side up. I was actually thinking about getting those tattooed, but I didn't. So yeah, the next hints for the next mystery review. Folks, you're going to think or you might get it really quick. But then you have to ask yourself, is it really that easy? What these hints that I'm about to give? Michael J. Fox and 1985. Those are your two hints for next week's mystery review. Now, like I said, is it that easy? Am I indeed going to do what everybody might think it is? Or is it really that easy? Or did I just give you something else that you are not thinking of? Thank you so much to everybody for tuning in. Dan Blackroyd, Price is Right Reviews, Ruben Thomas, JM 2021. Also, thank you to O'Brien D. Bricky Sr. for liking on Facebook. Jack of all casuals. You think it's easy. You think it's easy with those two hints, but I'm telling you, it ain't that easy. Anyway, thank you for tuning in as well, and for those of you who did not comment in the comment section but did stop by, thank you so much for supporting me, folks. And yes, you are late this time, and I got to get my lunch going because, yeah, I'm starting to get a little hungry. But anyway, folks, thank you so much for tuning in. Stay tuned for next week's 1985 and Michael J. Fox. If you know it, or if you think you know it, feel free to message me on Facebook to see if you're right. Anyway, folks, thank you so much for tuning in. You all know the drill if you're catching it on the replay. Like, comment, subscribe, share, all that jazz. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. What did you think of the Davinci Code, specifically the extended edition? Did you like it? Did you not? What were your problems with it if you didn't? Let me know all of it, folks. Anyway, this has been Orange Hat Reviews. Stay home.